if you're a student now, then you're only going to have a future if we manage to completely transform the whole of society. That goes for like how we make everything, our relationship to the natural world, how we organise society. And that's the only way you are going to have a future, is if we have a more equal society, then it won't tear itself apart as climate change stresses it. And all design, and I mean all creative work and all design should be focused towards solving these major issues.
As students, you probably have a real belief that design is important, and I can utterly tell you that it isn't. Because if your design is not doing something important, then it is totally unimportant.
First thing I would do to people coming into college, into an art or design environment, is to take them to see what happens to everything that they produce. So we used to run tours, for example, I used to take people down to the Edmonton, it's called the Eco Park, which is a bit of a strange name, but it's the place where 7 of London's boroughs' waste gets incinerated or composted. And it's absolutely eye-opening when you go to this centre to see this is the quantity of stuff that is being produced every day. Or to go to an MRF plant where they will take your dry mixed recycling and unpick it so that it gradually gets separated out into its different individual materials. Those things are really important for designers to see, because otherwise designers and artists you're not really aware of the consequences of what you do.
Well, I would definitely enforce sustainability as a core principle of what you're designing. It can't be anymore something that will get you extra points. It has to be a necessary thing if you want to pass your grade. You have to address the way you produce, the afterlife, etc. But I would also really change the way we teach design in a way that it will be closer to how we teach the tenets of marketing. We need to really formalize how we teach sustainability, because when I was studying 10 years ago, we were really talking about brand identity, user friendliness, user interface, all of these things, and there were really clear deliverables for every project. So I think I would impose a similar system for all the tenets of sustainability. And another thing is teaching really project management as well, but project management to be able to produce in a sustainable way.
I would like to encourage the idea that the moments where you feel most uncertain are those in which the greatest potential to challenge the system and develop something new can actually occur.
The problem with design is we're still training designers to think about physical stuff. We don't train designers to think in systems. And so we're not tasked as designers, and we're not trained as designers to think about the impact of our design decisions at all. Design is a fantastic discipline, which is really great at problem solving. It's a great way of understanding and interpreting people and being able to influence people's everyday behavior. So it's a great tool to be able to use, but we're not really, until very recently, we've not really been using that tool in the right way. We've been using it for all the wrong reasons.
I mean, when I was studying, we were still looking a lot at the IDEO model. IDEO was a company in San Francisco that came up with this, what they call the human-centered design. So design thinking on the human and the needs of the person. And I remember that really struck me, because I think it'd be interesting to redefine that as well. What are the needs of the human nowadays? And perhaps to come up with a nature-centered design, and the human as not the overpowering priority here, you know, but just basically another animal in our natural world.
Fashion is a hugely polluting business. Fashion has a bigger carbon footprint, a man-made carbon footprint, than aviation and shipping combined. You know, we have more than enough clothes already made. We have more than enough material already made. We have made enough stuff. We have reached peak stuff. So we need to radically alter how we look at the materials that we are using to create things. We do not have everlasting supplies of fresh water. We do not have everlasting quality of topsoil to grow cotton. We cannot keep extracting oil to make synthetic materials to design clothes for fast fashion companies that are only promoted to be worn a couple of times before they are disposed of, possibly ending up in landfill and taking up to, you know, we don't know how long they're going to take to biodegrade, if ever, because we've only been making synthetic fabrics for the last 70 years. So what needs to change is the responsibility of the designer. So if we had a system designed for disassembly, a circular design process where we, as designers and creatives, we considered the end of life of the product just as much as we consider the saleable aspect of the product and the use of the product. So if you are making something that is never going to break down in the environment and cannot be recycled, you should be held responsible for that. You know, we are in the midst of the 6th mass extinction. We are seeing biodiversity rates falling. We are essentially wiping out so much of our natural environment and the ecosystem of which we are wholly dependent as human beings.
Recycling, which has been sold to us for decades as what we should aspire to, is simply not going to save us. A lot of the critical raw materials included in the devices that we use that are in our pockets day in, day out, simply cannot be recycled, or most of them aren't recycled sufficiently. So when we're told that it's important to bring back the product to a manufacturer so that it can be recycled, well, if we can reuse it and repair it, we should always go for that first. There's data showing that in the UK, 1 of 4 products, almost 25% of products that are taken to a recycling center could have been reused, maybe just needed a small repair. The vast majority of the environmental impact of all electrical and electronic products that we use lays within the manufacturing phase. Take a smartphone, for example. Approximately 80% of all the greenhouse gas emissions linked to that product have to do with making it. Now, when you think about that, and you think that normally these products are designed to last 3 years, if we change that and if we extend the amount of time that we use them for, that's the only way that we have to reduce our environmental impact. Basically, that means slowing our voracious appetite for the latest and the greatest and concentrate on what we've been saying for a while, that the most ethical device is the one you already have. This has implications for designers, and we'd like to inspire a new generation of designers that put people and planet at the center and not just concentrate on marketing departments saying that products should be a little bit thinner so that they are impossible to open up and cannot be repaired and need to be replaced.
This is the most exciting moment in history to be a designer, because design is all about change, and we are in a moment where the world is desperate for change. People are crying out for change. People don't know what they should do to make a difference. Businesses don't know how to do things differently. Designers can help work those things out. We need new systems, we need new services, we need new products, new tools, new technology. It's all there for the taking. So this is the best moment that design's ever had. It's terrifying, but also exciting.
As creatives, we have wonderful ideas and expertise at our fingertips. We can. It's not just about painting pretty pictures, designing lovely clothes. We have the power to create new systems, and we have the power to create these wonderful positive systems that can affect such fantastic change. The position of a designer really now in this era that we're in, it's very exciting. It's not all doom and gloom, but it's a responsible one. And I think if we had circular design in place, design for disassembly in place, that would radically alter how we think about the entire design process.
As makers and as agents of change, we really need to push back and become stronger. This is crucial because some manufacturers are starting to smell that it's a good idea and try to own it and just give an abridged version that works for them, but it's not really in the interest of people and planet. So we need to stay alert, and I think students can play a phenomenal role in showing with their practices, with their projects, that it is not just possible but an imperative to make things that can last and can be modular and can be repaired by design, and not as an afterthought, as it often happens with large manufacturers and multinationals.
Green thinking has to be embedded right at the heart of everything you do. Now that's easy to say and really difficult to do because it's so multifaceted. I mean, as an architect, for example, you need to start thinking about, how am I not wasting space? You know, how can I make space be flexible, adaptable, and perhaps have a life beyond the existing kind of use value of this building. But perhaps even before that, if you're asked by a client to look at a project and there's an existing building on the site, you need to think about, do I need to demolish this building, or can it be retrofitted in some form that still performs its function? Because to trash it is to throw away a load of embodied energy. You need to also think about not wasting materials. So you need to design for the kinds of sizes that products come in and not have everything made so that there are loads of wasted offcuts and all the rest of it. But that knocks onto contracting, and you need to have skilled contractors. You need to have procurement processes in the industry which also are aligned to those kinds of values, so that people are not over-ordering and throwing away perfectly good materials, which is what happens at the moment.
Most of the decisions regarding sustainability are taken by government, often advised by research teams, which are often lobbied. And we rarely include an Indigenous person in a meaningful way for decisions about how we're gonna, talk about development. And that's really missing a trick, because they are the people that are, they're almost like the canaries in the mine. They're the first people to notice significant changes in our world, in our natural world. So for example, like one of my projects is about reintroducing native corn to Mexico. The seeds that we have reintroduced finally are starting to give really good results. Last year, there was a really bad drought in Mexico. And we could see a really clear difference in the farmers in this village that were planted the ancient seeds, which did fine because they've been selectively bred for thousands of years. And they were perfect in this year of drought. I mean, we had maybe not a huge harvest, but we had food at the end of it. And everyone that was planting industrial hybrids lost all their crops.
First, you need to have a vision of where you want to go. Don't try to solve the problem we have, but think about what would be the ideal vision and then design your way towards that vision. That's the only way to do it. As someone very famous or knowledgeable once said something like, if you try to solve problems using the tools that you've always used, you'll have the same problems that you've always had.
I have been working across advertising, music, fashion for the last sort of 18 years. I've had a really exciting, rich career, but when the penny dropped about how environmentally damaging the fashion industry is and how I was perpetuating these ideas of mass consumption and mass extraction of the Earth's resources and, you know, really contributing to the waste problems with the work that I was doing. It was sort of around that time I also started to become aware of, you know, the scale of human rights and environmental, you know, abuses along the supply chain. I did a 360 and I had a look at what I was doing and I decided that I needed to work as sustainably and ethically as possible. So sustainability, ethics, care for people, planet, animals, these are the things that have been guiding my work, and they have brought me to a place now where I am working with brands, companies, NGOs that are calling for and affecting real change.
It was only when I became a designer that I realised that what happens in life is that you have a set of values when you're growing up, and then you step into a profession, and somehow you manage to have two separate parallel paths. And when I worked that out, I realised that actually if I could earn a living and by living my values, then I'd feel comfortable with being a designer. But up until that point, I think I always had a very deep discomfort with what I was doing, because most of my career previously, my what I call my dirty past, but most of my career was designing very beautiful landfill.
I think it started when I was studying, really, because, you know, I studied in Central St. Martin's, and it was a wonderful course in the sense that for the first time I had this kind of almost global view, in the sense that I was with people from all over the world. But at the same time, I felt like we were being taught only one direction. And for me, back then, it was really about industrial production. That's what we were being told. And it was really sort of strange for me, because I come from a country that doesn't have industry, where a good chunk of the population wouldn't even have access to the products I would be producing. So with Mexico in my mind, I always decided, well, how can I design with a system for Latin America, for a developing country? And I figured we don't have an industrial production, but we do have amazing craftsmanship, and we do have this sort of 1,000-year-old knowledge about plants and animals that is still there, that is still alive. So how could we harness that? So actually, one of the pieces behind me, the loofah divider, was a whole series of furniture that I developed while studying, but as a self-directed project, where I just said, okay, let's focus on one material, really dive completely into it, understand it really well. So I did a whole series of furniture where it was about almost understanding the anatomy of the loofah, you know, like almost learn how to fillet it, almost like fish, to open it, to be able to control it in a way that it could be used as a building material. If I was to ban something, obviously you need to start with plastic. Yes, that's a given one, but it's almost a cliche. But I would also like to ban oversimplified solutions to plastic. Most of them are PLAs, most of them are made with cornstarch, and most of them are creating the problems that I'm trying to find, you know, solutions for. So this is another example of just like using buzzwords. Bioplastic, all of a sudden it gets a good pass, and you know, you're looking at what's happening, especially in Latin America, with whole forests being deforested to produce an alternative to a petroleum-based plastic. It makes no sense.
I think a ban on social media and smartphones in the college workplace would be really beneficial as well, because they're just an absolute drain on all of our creativity.
I would remove all the students' debt, and when they leave college, they would not leave in debt. They'd each get like £5,000 to go and like, or 10,000, just to fucking give them a little bounce into the world, so they could just stop, gather themselves, think about what they actually want to do.
draw up a list of kind of products that you shouldn't be thinking about using, and then set the challenge of only using a certain amount of stuff in order to make possible what you want to do. And I think that would impose a really interesting discipline on what we do as designers. And then to think about the whole life of the product that you make. So even if you're making an exhibition of your work, you know, what are you going to do with the exhibition stands and the things afterwards, or the frames and whatever, you know, it relates to sort of every aspect of what you do. You'd have to find recycled products, recycled materials, you know, stimulate the supply chains and that kind of thing, but also see these things as limited. So you've got to make the best use of what you've got.
I've done a lot of work with an organisation called Redress Asia, which challenges students, fashion students, to create clothing out of what is perceived as waste, end of rolls. They've used everything from umbrellas to sofa material to upholstery. And the way they work is they go, well, I don't start with a single big idea. What I do is I look at what's in front of me, from my mother's clothing to the umbrellas that I mentioned, and I see what's possible with them and how I can use those to translate concepts that are important to me. And I think that's a level of creativity that we should all aspire to, starting with the material first, translating it into something that's needed and isn't just creative for the sake of it, and then thinking about how it's going to be disposed at the end.
I wish that when I was at college, I had a better understanding of business. It took me years to really took me years to get onto get to a point where I could converse comfortably with someone who was leading a business. We're not trained in the language of business as designers, and it does mean that you're at a disadvantage when you go out into the world and you need to talk about things which are systemic. You're not really taken seriously, particularly if you're young and female.
I think we have a tendency to forget what sustainability is about, and it's important to be constantly redefining it, no? Because some of the terms I think are a little bit outdated. So my version of sustainability, and something that I enforce in my work, is not only about materials and resources, but it's about opportunities, especially for communities in the developing world. You know, if we talk about sustainability as a thing we're meant to ensure for the future generation to have the same opportunities that we had or more, we also have to include every member of society, not only consumers in the Western world. It's about how you source your materials, what kind of materials you're using, the afterlife of your materials. You know, are they easily disassembled, compostable? Recycled, really, there's the option of recycling, but for me, I try to always keep recycling as the last option. So it's more like, how do you create a system where you're really in control from the creation of your materials to the afterlife of your materials? And this is something that we do with a lot of my projects. So I almost exclusively focus on working with plant and plant-based materials, because we get that total control, from selecting seeds to planting them to harvesting to deciding how they get processed to be able to come back to the ground.
We need to radically alter the way that we approach sourcing materials and fabrics and resources to create products. And it's quite exciting, really, because when you reframe things and create a different challenge as a designer, as a creative, we have so much material already available to us, whether that is for fashion design, for product design, for interior design. We have so much available to us. Creatives have been recycling other creatives' ideas for as long as we can remember, so it's about time that we started really upcycling, repurposing, and redesigning what we already have in existence before we go out and plunder the earth for more resources.
Under capitalism and under the modernist project, we've been used to saying technology can sort everything out for us. If we get a piece of high-tech kit in, we can build whatever we like. We can build as many glass facades as we like, etc., because we can temper the environment using technology and energy. We need to start unraveling that. That is not sustainable anymore. We have to think about what happens at the end of life. We have to think about supply chains of materials and how the circular economy needs to feed into everything we specify. That's not really embedded in anything that happens in the building industry at the moment. And so we need to put pressure on the manufacturers to make sure their economy works better.
I think it would be very good for students to do a lot of collaborative work, but also it's good to be able to function on your own. So it's good to have that self-discipline, self-reliance.
So I would advise my student self to not waste any time and not waste any of my time frittering it away with brands who have little or no interest in environmental sustainability, ethics, care for their workers, brands who are pushing products that are not helping us.
I would put more of an emphasis on studying the connection between what I can contribute with what can make the biggest impact.
I'd say value your raw materials and find out where they come from and reconnect to nature and reconnect to the processes, and don't allow yourself, as the society very much would like you to do, to disconnect from where everything comes from, who's making everything and where it ends up.
Be less influenced by the mainstream. Follow the things that are really interesting to you, and actually there's probably more interesting stuff going on the margins that you should explore. Find your own way through and, you know, research the things that are of interest to you.
Learning to collaborate meaningfully with people is really important. Collaborate with friends, work on the things you really believe in, then they will come good for you. And actually that's probably the most important thing about going to college. It's actually all those connections you make and what you learn from those connections. So it's all, you learn as much from peers as you do from old gits like me.
It's crazy. I mean, you know, every year, just from a university, you have close to 80 or 90 designers, maybe sometimes 100 designers graduating every year. And these are all people that are going to be making key decisions on how we are going to produce and how we're going to manufacture our consumables. It's a huge responsibility.
There's so much that we want to soak up and we want to do whilst we're studying, but if there's any advice I'd give as well, I think just get back out into nature, spend as much time at Kew Gardens, take the train to Wales and walk up Snowdon, like get involved in nature again, reacquaint yourself with Mother Earth because she really needs you right now.